can use this one. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Before we begin our program today, inshallah, ask me anything. We're going to begin with celebrating the kalam of Allah, the speech of Allah, in the best possible way of celebrating the speech of Allah, which is beautifying and reciting the way of the Quran. And Allah give us the tawfiq to implement what we hear. So Sheikh Hassan, inshallah, will begin with recitation. Jazakallah khairan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا كل شيء خلقناه بقدر وما أمرنا إلا واحدة كلمح بالبصر ولقد أهلكنا أشياعكم فهل من مدكر وكل شيء فعلوه في الزبر وكل صغير وكبير مستطر إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. والأرض وضعها للأنام. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. والأرض وضعها للأنام. فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام. والحب ذو العصف والريحان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم.
Takbir. Allahu Akbar. Jazakallahu khairan, Sheikh Hassan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve you and your family, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let us and give us the opportunities to continue listening to the Quran in such recitation to penetrate our hearts and have an effect, and encourage us to continue with those actions that please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, there's nothing more better than the Quran. There's nothing more better. We can strive for anything in this world. We could strive for anything that we want, and it's still good to do so, but nothing compares to the Quran. And the beautiful thing is that the Quran is such a miracle. Not only is it the miracle that it's the speech of Allah, but also the structure of the language is what makes it a miracle. But the only book that's known to human beings and known to man, that's memorized from cover to cover, and a majority of the people that memorize the Quran are those who don't understand the language itself. What's driving them? What's encouraging those parents to tell those children? What's encouraging those children to memorize the Quran, and a lot of them, as far as who are non-Arab, for instance, that memorize the Quran, how is this a miracle, and how does this add even more to the miracle? Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that He revealed the Quran and He's the one who's going to preserve it, right? And when He says, إِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ, that we are the ones that are going to preserve it. There's an emphasis there where Allah refers to Himself as we, right? And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses that as an emphasis, and something else is going to come about, meaning Allah is telling us the future. And He's saying that the Quran is going to be preserved by me, meaning that nothing is capable of happening to that book. And even if it was physically burned or discarded of, or all the copies of the Quran were no longer with us, it's still in the hearts of men and women that preserve this book. Which adds to the miracle of that if all of these copies that we have of the Quran were no longer with us, we have young children, we have teenagers, we have middle-aged boys and girls, we have people of an elderly age that have memorized this book, and the majority of them who've made it a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year project to memorize it from beginning to end and don't understand the language, they're even a greater miracle that they're memorizing the book. They may not understand it, but they're preservers of the Quran. And that's what hafiz actually means, someone who preserves the Quran, right? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for whatever we've memorized to protect that in our hearts. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those who implement the book of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So since we're talking about the Quran, there's a few questions that came in that are regarding the Quran. The first one that's kind of related to the Quran, it's dua, it's salah, is the person asks, is it haram to pray to end up with a certain person and not just pray in general, right? And just so we can back up a little bit before answering the question, is number one, when we say pray, salah, in the Arabic language, linguistically means dua. Before salah, 5 times a day, prayer, was prescribed upon the believers, linguistically the Arabs used to use the word salah as dua. And when we hear the khatib say, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi, yusalli is basically the present tense of the noun, which is salah. The present tense verb, which is yusalluna, Allah is saying, Allah and His angels send salutations and blessings upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yusalli here is not that they pray wal-iyadhu billah to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they're praying for the sake of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rather, it means that they're sending blessings. So the word salah also means blessings. It can mean barakah. It has, in the Arabic language, the word salah has 6 meanings. One of the meanings, the technical definition, if you want to say, the Sharia definition is the 5 daily prayers that we pray, right? So if somebody were to ask, is it haram to pray, meaning that I'm only praying 5 times a day? Let's look at it from that sense. If I'm only praying 5 times a day, to end up with a certain person, when they're saying end up with a certain person, I'm thinking they're referring to marriage, right? That they need a favor from Allah. Allah, I need you, so I'm going to start praying, right? Meaning I'm going to start performing my salah. And the other part is, and not just to pray in general, meaning to pray for its original reason of why it was prescribed upon us, right? I would say, number one, yes, this shouldn't happen. It's not the intention to pray to pray salah for the sake of Allah. But what I could say is they can morph that intention. They can change that intention as a springboard to worship Allah and say, Ya Allah, that's why we make the dua, Rabbi ja'alni muqimus salati, right? Oh Allah, make me from amongst those who are the muqim, who are constantly establishing their prayer, right? And to say to Allah, Ya Allah, I'm reaching out to you. I haven't prayed before. I'm starting to pray now because I want to marry a certain person. And this is, I believe that you are the only one that can help me, which means that this person still has iman in their heart. Or else they could have done other things to have their dua answered, which means that the heartbeat of iman is still beating within them, that they know that they have to go to Allah because Allah is the only one and who's the final decider, right, of all of this. But nonetheless, our intention is to worship Allah because He said so. When we make our intention for salah, and that's why it's incorrect for somebody to pray, meaning salah, to Allah just to marry that person, right? But the intention is that I'm worshiping Allah only because He said so. And the number of rak'at that are there, for instance, we just prayed Salat al-Maghrib, 3 rak'at of Salat al-Maghrib, we actually don't know the exact reason why Allah gave us those number of rak'at. Even Rasulullah didn't know. So the reason why we do that is we refer to as amr ta'abbudi. It's a matter of worship. It doesn't have to make sense and it doesn't have to be a reason, especially for this type of worship. It's because Allah said so. That's it. And the fact that you do it without knowing how much ajr you're getting for sure, and that's what all the ibadat. The number of rak'at, why is it? Well, we don't know. And if we don't know, we actually don't care because Allah didn't tell us. We're doing it because He said so. That's how simple it is. The fact that we're proving to Allah that we are in full submission, we don't care why the numbers of rak'at are the way they are. We don't care why these actions are in this order. We don't care about anything. It's a matter of submission, right? So the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is that if the person is praying for that reason, I would say to them, no, that's incorrect, that is wrong. But what you can do is, since you're praying anyway, is start making your intention for Allah and ask Allah to make you a worshiper of Allah in full sincerity. So now Allah has pushed you towards salah, because that's a favor too. And the fact that the person asked this question is another favor from Allah, that they're seeking something. And in hopes that we're answering this correctly, that's why we say, Wallahu a'lam, in hopes that we're answering this correctly, the most foolproof, bulletproof way we can answer this question is to continue praying but change your intention. For instance, I'll give you an example, is that if we're praying salah, let's say we're praying sunnah or we're praying extra and somebody sees us and shaitan comes and does waswas to you and says, hey, you're praying because this person's watching you. We're praying because the potential father-in-law is here and you're praying in this way. The potential mother-in-law is here, so you're extending your rak'at, right? Islamically, we don't break our salah because shaitan did waswas and you think your intention has changed. Rather, you continue praying to fight shaitan. Which is why the dua of Rasulullah is, he gave us instruction. Shaitan is going to come and do waswas to you. And the main shaitan who comes and distracts you in your prayer, his name is Khanzab, as the hadith mentions. And when the shayateen and their cronies and your qareen of your own shaitan that comes and distracts you in your salah, you turn to the left, you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, quietly, even if the imam is leading in salah, in fard. Say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, very quietly, whispering to yourself that even the person next to you can't hear you, and you spit, you dry spit to your left 3 times. That's it, right? And it's a beautiful thing that the more people that know this as the musallin, the more it helps. Because if somebody doesn't know that this is from the sunnah and they think you're looking at them and spitting at them, then that's... So if you see that happening to you, hopefully there's no spit actually coming out. If it does, forgive your brother or sister, but know that they're being distracted in their salah and they're practicing the sunnah of Rasulullah. The other is now, if we're referring to prayer as just general acts of worship, meaning that I'm doing dua to Allah only because I want to marry this person, that's fine. You know, that's awesome. Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah feek. You're my elder, you didn't have to do this. Allah preserve you and your family. Barakallah feek. Ameen. He made a dua that Allah give you zawja salihah. You know, if you do dua for somebody else, Allah grants that for you. So if He makes a dua for you, Allah is going to say, the angel is going to say, Ameen. That's how He wants it back. So, coming back, pardon our goofiness and our immature tangents here. Sometimes it's just the way I work, unfortunately. I need to work on it. But nonetheless, if the person's making dua and the dua is they're only doing dua for this one individual to be married to them, whether it's a man wanting to marry a woman or a woman wanting to marry a man, whatever the case is, the dua, there's no discrimination in dua. You could do dua about anything. But the beautiful thing is that if you also want to change this and you're feeling guilty, Ya Allah, and before you go to sleep, you're tossing and turning, I'm only doing dua to get married. The beautiful hack to this, meaning the hack in your dua, is you start off your dua with a formula which becomes a better chance of it being granted, right? And better chance, I'll tell you why I said that, because all of our du'as are granted to us, we just don't see them. But all of our du'as, anytime the abd, the slave of Allah, reaches his hands or her hands to the skies, or just makes a dua in their heart in sincerity to Allah, Allah always grants it, but Allah doesn't always grant it the way you want it to be, because we don't actually know what's good for us. Allah knows what's good for us. But the foolproof way of asking for dua is very, very simple. And I think a majority of us know this. If they don't, come to me afterwards and I can send you a link or a copy and paste of Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. You start off with that by saying all salam is from you, Allah, right? And you're praising Allah. The second portion after that is you send salutations on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. And then you ask for whatever you're asking for, right? You're asking for a pious or a good, upright spouse, husband, wife, whatever the case is. So now you're not only asking for one thing. You're praising Allah, you're sending salutations on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then you are asking for whatever you want. So that guilt is completely alleviated. You can do that for the rest of your life, and Allah is going to love you because you're praising Allah, which Allah loves. You're sending salutations on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which Allah loves. Allah and the malaika do it themselves. That's how important that is. And you're asking for whatever you want. So I would say, to answer this person's question, exclusively devoting your salah and your worship for this one person in order to get married is not good. It's wrong, but it's very easily changeable. It's very easy to modify that to make it a robust act of worship, inshallah. By the way, I did have a few questions pertaining to hifz. So I'm giving you guys a heads up, inshallah. In the coming weeks, whenever the Sheikh is available, inshallah, Sheikh Hassan, me and him are going to do the Friday night Ask Me About Anything from Maghrib to Isha. But it's more going to be me asking him questions on an interview style about Quran, about the qira'at, about his life, what made his journey. And this is kind of selfish from me. I kind of wanted this information for myself. He doesn't like to hear this, even though he's half my age or a third of my age. He's still my teacher, and I really mean that. But I want to learn from his life, and I want to know what makes him tick, what gave him that. So all of the guests that we have here, it's for our own benefit and for everybody's benefit, inshallah, and the person themselves are, inshallah, are going to benefit too. So that's going to be coming in the upcoming weeks, inshallah, that we'll make an announcement about. So the individual that asked about the method of what is a good way to memorize the Quran, I'm just going to give a very small, tiny answer, and we're going to save it for the big stage with Sheikh, inshallah. So the two very, very easy approaches are what's considered standard, and I'm taking it from the mindset of the individual is not memorizing full time, right? It doesn't matter if it's a child, if it's someone who's a teenager, someone who's middle-aged, someone who's elderly, someone who's a boy, who's a girl, man, woman, it doesn't matter. What's a very, very easy method of memorizing is after Salat al-Fajr, you start and give yourself a time slot. I'm giving myself, and start off small. Please, please, please don't start off with, I'm going to go all the way till the sun comes up. You know, if it's an hour, you pray and there's an hour for the sun to come. If you're not used to doing it, don't do it. You want to get used to doing it. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. If you're not used to memorizing and sitting down with the Quran 1, 2, 3 hours at a time, don't start off that way, because you will be very disappointed in yourself. Unless you're a super, mashallah, very, very dedicated person, you're very mind over matter and you don't care. That's very few of us. I'm telling you, I can't do that if I wasn't used to it. I'm just speaking from myself first. So you want to get into a habit that's very habitable, that can be a very easy habit. Start off with, you know what, I'm going to memorize for 10 minutes after Fajr, every day or 5 days a week. On the weekends I'm going to take off. Bismillah, no problem. And whatever I memorized for that 10 minutes after Fajr, I'm going to review that after Maghrib to make sure that it's solid. So even if you memorized, I think there's a calculation that was done that if you were to memorize 3 lines of Quran a day, it would take you 8 years to memorize the Quran, which is still not too shabby. It's amazing. How many of us have been working on a project of memorizing a certain amount of Quran, and we just delayed and delayed and delayed, and it just doesn't end up happening, and it's been more than 8 years now, you know? So 3 lines a day would be 8 years of memorization, right? And 3 lines are actually pretty doable in 10 minutes, right? Depending on the person, but for most people, I think 3 lines is pretty possible. So the revision after Maghrib. The slightly more intense version of that is that you would start to memorize, after Fajr, meaning 20 minutes after Maghrib, and then review what you memorized before you go to sleep, and then start in the morning for Fajr. There's something about memorizing after Isha before you go to sleep. It's retained a lot better in the mornings, right? The other shorter version is, instead of after Fajr and Maghrib, is that you start after Isha, right? Or before you go to sleep. Let's say that you're able to dedicate yourself to not being where you're deprived of sleep, where you go to sleep at like 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. and then you're like, oh, I didn't memorize the Quran. No, as soon as you get home, even from after the masjid, if you pray Isha at the masjid, give it 15 minutes of memorization, and then whenever you wake up in the morning for Fajr, after you're done with Salat al-Fajr, just revise it, make sure you have it, and you're good. So it's more like a Isha to Fajr, Isha to Fajr, Isha to Fajr thing, right? So that way, the ending of your day is with the Quran, of memorization of the Quran, the beginning of your day is with the Quran, and that cycle repeats, which in turn is beginning of the day of the Quran, ending of the day is Quran, right? And that's another methodology. And again, I'm saying this for somebody who doesn't have a full-time school of Quran that they're in right now. If they have that, that's a whole different approach, which myself and Sheikh Hassan can discuss when me and him have the interview style, inshallah, in these upcoming weeks, either next week or the week after, from Maghrib to Isha, regarding the Quran and questions regarding the Quran. Do we have any questions regarding this specific topic as far as the Quran or memorizing the Quran in the crowd before we move on to another topic, inshallah, which may not be completely related? Sorry, I should turn my microphone off while I was sipping. So that question, inshallah, will be answered. How do you memorize the Quran in the most effective and efficient way? And again, I just received another message about this. So this question will be answered in great detail with me and Sheikh Hassan, inshallah, when we share the stage on Friday night. Inshallah, either next Friday or the week after, we'll have an announcement about that, inshallah. There's an individual that asked a question regarding Haman in the Quran. The person had mentioned that we hear people and scholars, when they're elaborating and doing tafsir of the Quran, they talk about Fir'aun and Qarun, but they don't spend, or we don't know too much about Haman, right? So something pretty interesting is, unfortunate for him as Haman is concerned, but something very interesting is, just to give you a little snippet, is that Haman was actually considered one of the right-hand men or main advisors of the Pharaoh. And I hate to use, while we're talking about Islam, corporate or like IT jargon, but if you were to think of him being, because essentially that's what he was doing, he was a project manager basically of Pharaoh. In what sense? In Surah Al-Qasas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a verse of those people who Pharaoh asked to build him a palace. So Haman was one of the people that Pharaoh Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh also sheds light on this. And as far as Haman is concerned, is that whenever he wanted to build a palace, of which he said that it would be in comparison to the God of Musa, so I can be elevated, which Musa is elevated with his God, that I can be more at the level of his God, and then I can announce to people that I'm God, that you could worship me. Na'udhu billah. So when he made it, he told him to make it out of clay, and Haman was the person. One of the main people in his cabinet, yes, the Pharaoh had a cabinet, and he had judges, and he set all of that up. The main individual who was a part of his cabinet, and a judge, if you want to say, was Haman. So when Allah and His Rasul are referring to these people, they're people who were very much involved in the promotion of the taghut, of the haram, of the rebellion against Allah on this earth. And they're people who were intelligent enough to differentiate what was right and wrong. And there were people who knew the message of Musa alayhi salam was correct, but because of their arrogance, they didn't accept, rather they became enemies of it, open enemies. So that's a little bit about Haman. The other question that we have, please give me 1 second, it's refreshing. This question is about the adhan. Is it okay to pray when while the adhan is going on, right? I'm taking this into consideration that the person is not in the masjid, they hear the adhan from wherever they are, and to start praying while the adhan is going on, or is it sunnah for waiting for the adhan to be complete? So there's two parts to this. One is the individual that's listening to the adhan, that's there, then obviously they wait and they pray with the jama'ah, right? That's, unless if there's an emergency, unless the person is waiting for the adhan and they're in the masjid, they pray and they have to leave for some emergency and they can't wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour for the jama'ah, that's understandable, that's something else. But if you happen to hear the adhan and you're not in the masjid and you're also in a hurry and a rush, is it allowed? Is it an accepted salah? Yes, because the reason why the adhan starts is salah time begins. So yes, it would be permitted to pray when the adhan is going on, as long as you're not in the masjid waiting for salah of the imam and you're not in an emergency. It would be, because it is now time for salah and you can pray your salah, right? But is it better to listen to the entire adhan? Is it better in the sense that, is this a sunnah of Rasulullah? Is this what he encouraged? In multitude of hadith that we can take directly and indirectly? Yes, because the preparation for the salah is by way of dhikr. And by way of listening to the adhan and doing the dhikr with all of the parts of the salah, Allahu Akbar, you say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. There's lots and lots of ajr, not just ajr, but we see it as a multitude of benefit. Number one benefit is that we're encouraged to do so, so it's obeying Allah and His Rasul. Number two is that we're doing lots of dhikr in the process of the adhan, and it's a very honorable thing to witness the adhan and praying the jama'ah, in that same jama'ah. Number three is it's in preparation in our khushu' for the salah, right? We are not people that believe that we can do a whole bunch of things and mess around, and even though we may be caught up in that situation sometimes, and then all of a sudden the imam says Allahu Akbar and you're still laughing from a joke that one of your buddies said and you're saying Allahu Akbar. Like, we're humans, that may happen once in a while, it's cool, because we're humans, and Allah preserve us and protect us. But that is not going to be our A game for our salah. Our A game for our salah is preparation. Our khushu' starts with the wudu. Our khushu' begins also with the adhan and the adhkar that go with the adhan. And then reading the dua after the adhan. And then reading our sunnah. And all of that is in preparation for fard. So it's a beautiful thing that those are actually acts of worship also. The reasons why we have the sunnahs before our fard is not just it's an act of worship and there's immense amount of ajr for it, but also Allah gave that us as a favor in preparation in our khushu' for the main event, which is the fard prayer, right? So for our 5 main events, there's all of these intros that we have. There's all of these standard salawat and adhkar that we have. Yes, sir. Can you use that one?
Jazakallah khair for wonderful questions and answers. My 2 cents, if you come in and the adhan is going on, and then you start your sunnah, I mean, you're actually defeating, you can focus. The adhan is going on, it's light on the microphone. Just wait till the adhan is over. You can focus, when it's over. Thank you.
Yes, Jazakallah khairan. Yeah, you're right. Even if the person wants to pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid, it's nice to, like the Sunnah of Rasulullah of Tahiyyat al-Masjid, giving respect to the masjid. Another opportunity, again, of all of the fruits and benefits that Allah has given us by way of worship, is that you wait for the adhan to finish, so you can do all the adhkar with it, read the dua of the salah, of the adhan, and then after that you can do your Tahiyyat al-Masjid. Jazakallah khairan. And it's a distraction, you're right. It is a distraction. Yes, sir.
So when we pray namaz, we're always told that in order to maintain khushu in it is you have to remember Allah during namaz, right? But that's very abstract and very vague. Is it possible for us to visualize anything during prayer to maintain khushu? Or is there anything specific you could tell us that we could do besides remembrance?
No, that's a great question. Shaykh Hassan al-Basri, rahimahullah, the Imam of the scholars of purification of the soul, the Imam from amongst the Tabi'een, the generation of Imam Hanifa, the generation after the Sahaba. Hassan al-Basri was asked, it's attributed to him, wallahu alam, but it's a beautiful prescription. One, he said, he was asked, how do you concentrate in your salah? And he said, I imagine that I'm standing on the sirat on Yawm al-Qiyamah and I have to cross it, right? And I'm hoping I'm going to cross it. So how good is your salah going to be then? I imagine the Kaaba is in front of me. I imagine that Jannah is on my right side. I imagine Jahannam is on my left side. And I imagine that the angel of death is hovering over me, right? And it basically, literally not just covers all sides and directions of the human being, but it gets you into the understanding of all the main tenets of our aqidah and our deen. Our direction, which is the qibla, which we're making intention to pray in. Even if we're not able to get that right direction, we're still making the intention, right? We're also cognizant and understanding that my akhirah depends on the salah by way of the sirat. The Jannah and Jahannam, we know they're real because Allah said so. They're not something that are figurative, They're literal and it's real. And they're on my right side and my left side. And the destroyer of all pleasures in this world, right? Which is death, and the angel of death is hovering above me. So how good is that salah going to be, right? So that's just something that I really much usually think of, because not only was I taught that as a child, I was taught that as an adult. And it's just one of those things that just stick. There's a lot of things that you could concentrate on, right? But there's one of those things that stick. And the other is obviously one of the benefits and one of the wisdoms of our 5 daily salah is it's the best thing that the human being can do is showing gratitude to Allah. So you are concentrating on Allah and the gratitude and the favors that He's given us, right? And if we're praying in the loud prayers, a great incentive to learn the Quranic Arabic language, and I'm very specific about the Quranic Arabic language, is that it can solve potentially 50 to 90% of the concentration issue, right? We all need, and I'm not saying all of you, and I don't know if all of you, what you speak and what you understand, because it's not about speaking, it's about understanding also, right? I don't know who in this room understands the Quran, who doesn't, so I'm not talking about anyone in specific. But what I'm saying is that we always need an incentive to learn Quranic Arabic. It doesn't mean that you have to be able to speak the language. I know people, and I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, I know a teacher in India who is a teacher of the Arabic language. He has done shuruhat, meaning explanations, and expounded upon major mutun, major texts of the Arabic language, and he actually can't speak the Arabic language because he doesn't have any practice, right? He's living in India, but he is somebody who understands the Arabic language very well and is somebody who's basically codified with Muslims and grammarians and linguists of the world. And, so it's not about speaking per se, it's just about understanding, as long as you can understand it. And let that be an incentive for all of us, inshallah. Allah, please accept and make it easy for us, Ya Rab. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback on this brother's question.
Camelback. You mean?
Yeah, camelback. Astaghfirullah. Yeah. If we were to be alone, right, let's say at our home, and we're praying salah, or you're on the road, let's just say working and it's time for salah, can we pray out loud alone, loud enough where we can hear ourselves, and this way we can concentrate more because there's a lot of distractions
And
going
you're talking about the fard prayers.
around? All the prayers.
Very good. So the sunnah prayers, actually, we're not allowed to actually do them, bil jar, as we call it, bil jahar. Because the jahar prayers, the loud recitation prayers, are reserved only for fard prayers, right? But one thing is if you're kind of whispering it, like if you're just working, like, I'll give you a small example, and it's not a yes and no, I wish it was, is because since we were talking about hifz, a good practice of memorization of the Quran, you'll see this in many madaris and many places of memorization, is that when the individual has memorized a portion of the Quran for the day, his teacher will tell him, go do that in your nafil prayers. Like go pray 2 rakat nafil, or go pray 4 rakat nafil, or in your sunnahs for dhuhr, right? Or they would ask the person to pray the sunnah prayers, but read it whispering so I can hear it, and he'll walk by all the students listening to the students. For the sake of learning and that type, and is under supervision of somebody who's asking you to do it for your memorization, there's a little bit of leeway for that. So the fact of the matter here is, in the Sharia, for the sake of teaching, you're allowed to do certain things, right? But if you're by yourself, you're allowed to actually whisper it to yourself, but not that if somebody, in loud enough that if somebody was next to you, they could actually hear your recitation and think that you're praying, like fard prayers, right? So all of us, sometimes, we vocalize, because Rasulullah encouraged us to actually move our lips in our salah, right? In the hadith of Rasulullah, the Sahabi was asked, how do you know that he used to do talaffuz? How do you know that he used to move his mouth and lips while he was praying? And the Sahabi, he actually mentioned the hadith because he could even see it from a distance. He said, بِإِضْطِرَابِ لِحْيَتِهِ, by the shaking of his beard, by the moving of his beard when he was praying on his own, right? So he said, even from a distance, I was able to see his beard moving in the sunnah prayers, right? So Rasulullah actually encouraged us not to seal our lips and pray. He encouraged us to move our lips. In the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. We're going to do that regardless, right? So since we're able to do that, if you sometimes read loud, all of us have prayed in those silent prayers with the person next to us or behind us, we can hear them very clearly, and they're reading, mashallah, so loud that they're distracting us in our salah. And I'm like, wait, I'm trying to concentrate on Surah Al-Fatiha. So in that sense, yes, but that's not considered loud. That's just normal whispering that you would do when you're reading the Quran, but it shouldn't be raised or elevated, right? So in that sense, yes, it would be allowed. But to read it loudly because no one else is around you, the underlying legal reasoning isn't about not anybody around us. It's about the fact of the matter that the loud recitation is only reserved for Salat al-Fajr, Salat al-Dhuhr, and when I'm saying this, I mean the fard prayers, Asr, Maghrib, Salat al-Fajr, Maghrib and Isha, only these, right? Bismillah, yes sir. Allah give you shifa of your knee injury. Allah give you a cure. Let his brother ask, please, and I'll come to you, inshallah, because he was waiting. Sorry, brother. Yes, Bismillah, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
His mom is calling him.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Sometimes, like when we are doing salah, the brothers next, like they're reading so loud, it's, distracting us. Sunnah prayers, even some fard prayers, they are doing their tasbihat and their attahiyat so loud. So what should we do? Like, should we tell them after that?
Very good.
Please do not, you are disturbing us, because there is few brothers constantly, and I don't know. He comes next to me and does it all the time. So
Yeah, so if it's repetitive, I mean, mashallah, if it happens to be that it's a similar brother that comes to you, that's a sign from Allah that He keeps bringing him to you and is distracting you. So that's a way of you guys beginning a great relationship, of you just giving him nasiha, inshallah. Because everything happens for a reason. There's no such thing as a coincidence in our deen. Everything is, al-qadr. And So to answer your question, yes, the first thing is, yes, you should be able to give nasiha to your brother out of, with grace, in a very graceful manner, because we are the deen and the people of nasiha, and it should be done very eloquently, it should be done very nicely, it should be done with the type of rahmah. Like if you were doing the same thing, because a lot of times they actually don't know. The people that I've had to correct, they actually didn't know they were reading like that. They have no idea. They're just trying to concentrate. They're trying to worship Allah. And maybe that's the thing that's bringing them into their khushu'. But sometimes our khushu' can actually distract other people, which shouldn't happen. So that has to be given with rahmah, right? It has to be given with a balance. And turn to the brother with a smile. Brother, may Allah accept our salah. You know, start with some kind words and say, brother, if you know, I prayed next to you, or I prayed next to you multiple times in your situation. You know, is it possible, you know, that you can just lower your voice a little bit while you're reading your salah? I'm not telling you to completely be silent, but it was just distracting me, and you know, I wouldn't want that to happen to any of our other brothers. So if you can do that, please, and keep me in your du'as that Allah makes my salah accepted, you know? Because the people that I actually did realize do that, they're razor focused in their salah. They're razor focused. It's just the people around them aren't, you know? That's all it is. But they're razor focused, and I think it's really important, but we have to take that act that they're doing and make it into a means of us coming together even closer, inshallah. But you would be the best person to do it. But if you think that you're not good at that, you could just ask somebody. And that's the beautiful thing about having imams here. They could do all that work for you. You just go up to them and like, Imam, as a part of your response, like, you wouldn't word it like that, but like, you know, can you just make an announcement that brothers are reading really loudly and during their salah, and it's disturbing us? And you could do that too, you know? And sometimes people just don't know. They actually don't know they're doing it. It's the same thing with people who chew really loudly when they're eating. They don't know that they're doing it. Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Wa alaikum salam.
So, I'm a convert. Alhamdulillah, I met you when I first came here. Alhamdulillah, Sheikh Hamid. Okay, I got two questions.
Yes, sir.
So, something about music. One is a haram. I completely stopped it during my journey. Of course, I want to be. I'm an enthusiast individual, so I love to study. I love to know more about Islam, mashallah, alhamdulillah. And I've been doing my research, I'm doing my studies, I do my reading, and I saw, like, of course, like the musical instruments of idle talk and stuff like that. So I completely stopped it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But of course, there's a lot of controversies of people saying, oh, like, there's good music and there's bad music, and which one should I listen to, which one should I not listen to? So that's my first question. It's like, is there some type of music which is haram, or they're all, like for example, like the musical instruments, even though they're like praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they still have instruments in the background, like piano, guitar, drums, or something like that. So that's my question.
Very good. And what was
And my second one is, so it was like something with the salat too, like when our beloved Hassan Ali, when he recites, when we're like in Jummah, or we're just playing Maghrib together, right? Or Isha, or any type of salat, do we keep our mouth like shut, or do we recite, like we have our, like for example, like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he of course, have his tongue moist when he was reciting the Quran when he's by himself. Well, I don't know if everybody when he's reciting, right? I don't know if anyone else was like having their lips are moving while they're together. So that's my other question.
Very good. Great. I'll answer your second question first. Oh, sorry, I had to switch microphones. This has a little bit of an echo because the battery went out on this one, but the second one we'll answer first, if you're okay with that, inshallah. By the way, Jazakallah khair, it's good to see you. MashaAllah, you're a soldier, you're still walking here even though your knee's injured. Everyone keep your brother in your du'as, please. And you're looking, MashaAllah, very handsome, very beautiful. MashaAllah, Allah preserve you and your beauty, Asha. I mean, Ya Rab. The second question, as far as should we be moving our lips. So the only thing that we can actually allude to is as far as Surah Al-Fatiha, if the Imam's reading loudly, right? The understanding is that there is no salah unless if it's with Surah Al-Fatiha. There's no salah that's accepted. So some scholars have taken that literally. When I say some scholars, I'm talking about the generation of the Sahaba, the companions, and the generations after them. If you want to call them the jurists, right? The jurists of the Ummah, they have two separate understandings of this, and they're both correct. You could choose either or. in specific to Surah Al-Fatiha. So when the Imam, let's say, is reading Salat Al-Fajr, which is 2 rak'at, right? 2 units. He starts with Surah Al-Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And then after he finishes, he may pause for a little bit. Maybe you sense that. That's your opportunity to read Surah Al-Fatiha. And then he's going to start the next surah. Next surah, you're quiet and you listen. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, إِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنِ, when the Quran is recited, stay quiet and think deeply and ponder. فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا. Right? You listen and you deep contemplation. It has to do with listening. So Surah Al-Fatiha is the only one. The other is when the Imam's reciting, then you're going to just listen to the Quran. Right? And in the quiet prayers, I mean, we can discuss that if you want, like in the quiet prayers, because in Dhuhr and Asr, those are quiet. What do we do while the Imam's reciting quietly? Do we recite quietly? Do we not recite quietly? What do we do, right? So, a general practice is, yes, it's allowed to, like, I know that you said that you're new to the fold, but have you heard of like the different scholars like Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam al-Shafi'i, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the generation that were after the Sahaba that were jurists? So I'm just going to give you a very, very simple picture here. You had Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you had the Sahaba, his companions. His companions had students. Whatever they learned from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of them were geographically located in different places. They took from the companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it happened to be that they had students and they codified Islamic legal theory based on the Quran and Hadith, and then people, it made it easier for people to practice the religion, right? On a legal level, like legally, how do I pray? How do I not pray? When is it allowed to pray? How do I do wudu? How do I not do wudu? What's the order I should go in? How do I make legal contracts? All that kind of stuff, right? So those are people that we refer to as the fuqaha, the jurists of this ummah. There's many more too, but there's 4 that generally the ummah follows, one of the 4. That's number 1 is Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam al-Shafi'i, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, right? Generally, a majority of the world is going to be following one of these 4. And then from the 4th one that I mentioned, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, there's also branches from that too, which is fine. They're all in legality, and this is one thing that I think before I continue should be very, very clear for all of us. These are in matters of legality where differences of opinion are allowed. It's open to interpretation. But in the matters of Allah being one and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being the final messenger and the angels and the books and Jannah and Jahannam, there's no difference of opinion in those. They don't differ on our belief. They differ on practicality of how we practice and how we move our bodies in religion, which is allowed, as long as it's based in the Quran and the Hadith, right? So that being said, according to some of those jurists that I'd mentioned, I don't want to confuse you with names, there's also a difference of opinion. And a difference of opinion is a blessing, it's not a bad thing in the Sharia, in Islam. The difference of opinion is that in the loud prayers, you were to stay quiet, you didn't just listen to the Imam. In the silent prayers, you're allowed to read. The others are of the opinion that you only read Surah Al-Fatiha in all of those, the loud ones and the quiet ones, and then you stop there, right? So to make it very, very easy for you and for all of us, like even like community members and for imams, if you see that the imam, generally how he reads, he'll say, for instance, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and then he'll pause. You can say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen right then. Or if he reads the whole Surah Al-Fatiha and then there's a little bit of a gap there, then you can read Surah Al-Fatiha there, and then he continues, right? And there's also an opinion of if the Imam reads, even including Surah Al-Fatiha, you don't read. Imam Abu Hanifa is of that opinion, that you read nothing behind the Imam. The Quran is only meant for listening. If you're a follower, meaning you're praying behind the Imam, you read absolutely nothing and only listen to the Quran, which is also valid. There's nothing wrong with that either. Cool? So that somewhat answer your question? Okay, Jazakallah khairan. So the first part is the music part that you asked is one of these questions. The difference of these are going to go on till Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's going to go on till the Day of Judgment. It's not going to end. But to make it easier for you, and to make it much easier for you, is that if you see generally there's 2 conflicting issues, and you're unsure about something, prohibition for you is the best option in anything, right? So, and we understand this from the hadith of Rasulullah that you refrain from those things that are doubtful for you, you consider it that as if it's prohibited for you. I'll give you a small example. If I don't know actually about something about Islam, for instance, I'll give you a small example about drinking tea. Very, very simple example, right? I actually haven't heard anything. I'm just speaking as an example. This is a new thing. It's halal or haram, I don't know. But you know what? For right now, I'm going to consider it haram because I don't know. For myself, not for anybody else, right? Because I actually don't know about it, right? The issue with music is the reason why there's conflicting issues historically is when Muhammad ﷺ said that I have made ma'azif. Ma'azif is a type of instrument. We refer to it as instruments now, right? But not all instruments are haram by way of Rasulullah ﷺ, because we know that drums, which we refer to as a duf, a drum which is on one side and hollow on the other side. That's something that was allowed Islamically. But as far as string instruments and wind instruments and all of that, a majority of the ummah and the jurists have been of the opinion that those are prohibited based on the hadith of Rasulullah. A majority of the ummah. Now there have been some Andalusian scholars and some scholars that came later that allowed it based on their culture and what their understanding was, and that's fine. But a majority of Muslim scholars, especially of the earlier generations, considered wind instruments, string instruments, and all those type of instruments haram. But what comes to be now is, if something doesn't have music, let's put it this way: if something has music and words also, the words are also something that are under scrutiny in Islam. Because someone can, let's just say, only be using a drum, which is allowed, but their words are displeasing to Allah, meaning they're encouraging something which is haram. They're bringing about, inciting certain things and promoting something that's not allowed Islamically. Then it doesn't matter what music they use or they don't use. So any type of recital, any type of setup of entertainment, if you want to say, which has music or doesn't have music, if it goes against what Allah has allowed, that would be considered prohibited. So some scholars, contemporary scholars, were of the opinion, when they were looking at the verses of the Quran and looking at the hadith of Rasulullah about instruments, and there seemed to be on the face value conflicting. That Muhammad ﷺ allowed it at some times and he didn't. Even that, there was lots of research done in it. But some of the scholars were of the opinion that since, for instance, the music that we have contemporarily and for the past, let's say, like 70 to 80 years, some of the majority of that would be in question. They said, and this is what people confuse, if there was, this is hypothetical, if there was a music that would be allowed, it would be something that would be close to classical music. You can take your call if you need to, it's not a problem.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize, brother. So if there was a music that would be allowed, it would be something that would be close to classical music, something that doesn't make your body move, something that doesn't make you violent. Like, there's a reason why people, and we believe music can actually be very satanic. I don't know if you've ever seen like mosh pits. You ever seen mosh pits where people listening to like death metal and they're beating up each other and running around acting crazy, and they're not even drunk. The music's doing that to them. And we believe that music can actually be very, very satanic also because it drives people. Like, you hear people like that, you went to the Iraq War. I don't want to bring anything political up. I'm just giving you examples. The first thing that comes to my head, documentaries that were done like on the Iraq War, they used to put on loud music, death metal music, and go and just kill as much as they can because it would take the guilt away from them. You understand what I'm saying? So that's what they would listen to. So they use it as a distraction. It can be very inciting. So best practice is, yes, alhamdulillah, if you stayed away from music, that's the best thing you can do for right now. And use that feeling of listening to things, listening to recitation that's beautiful and melodious.
I completely change music to, I change music to, of course,
Yes.
stuff that praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, it's just a lot better mentally and psychologically.
It is, you're right, and it's shifa, it's cure.
Yes. So another thing, like singing as well, like singing, of course the music, that's haram as well, no? Right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. I think there's one more question.
Yeah, you could take your time. I have
Yes.
to see. I had some new questions coming too, so I'm just gonna look at my phone real quick.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. You can go ahead.
All right. I have verses in the Quran that I put in my notes, of course, to ask student people that are student of knowledge, alhamdulillah, and of course they will answer my question. There is
MashaAllah. We should all actually learn from that. You document as soon as you have a question. Good use of your phone, MashaAllah.
Yeah, my phone praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I really have everything. Like, I completely stop all the, like, watching of these bad environments to, like, of course, iman boosters and stuff like that.
MashaAllah. Good for you, brother.
It does not matter. All right. In Surah At-Tawbah, verse 940, verse 40. It does not matter if you believers do not support him, for Allah did in fact support him when the disbelievers drove him out of Mecca, and he was only one of two. While they both were in the cave, he was sure. Oh yeah, that's my question. Where the cave of or Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Where? So is that in? Where is the cave? Yeah, that's my.
Can you read it? Or I can read it.
Yeah, it does not matter if you believers do not. Huh?
What verse number did you say?
Al-Tawbah 9, Al-Tawbah verse 40. Tawbah?
Oh, Jazakallah khair. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Jazakallah.
Okay, so you're asking
Like,
which
what-
cave in specific is it referring
also
to?
what the meaning of the verse in general. Of course, I want to know more about the verse.
No, very good. So when Rasulullah was making the hijrah with Abu Bakr radiallahu an, with his companion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like there's something stylistically that we have to know that Allah also is showing the person who's going to be reading this afterwards that Allah is aware of everything. That's the first thing. And sometimes you're in a difficult situation and you feel like no one else is watching and you're in this all by yourself. And in the hijrah, it was such a tumultuous travel, it was such a turmoil-filled travel that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh and Muhammad sallallahu actually had to be in a cave to get rid of the tracks of the mushrikeen that were coming out to bounty hunt them, basically kill them, assassinate them, bring them back dead or alive, right? And them two, Muhammad sallallahu Abu Bakr, were in the cave, right? And in this cave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us of what actually happened, and don't think that you're only, in another verse, that it wasn't just two, the third one was Allah, right? Meaning Allah and the knowledge of Allah, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to the hijrah of Rasul, the migration which took place in the 10th year, between the 9th and the 10th year of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, you're welcome, of course. Somebody asked a question about inheritance. If men taking double in inheritance, as he has qawama, but what about if she also works, meaning the wife also works and spends on her house, divorced or widow, at time of inheritance? Very good. As far as if conditionally, if the man is to take double the amount of inheritance, and that's only in this specific case. By the way, there's a beautiful book written, while I'm still trying to pinpoint this question, there's a book written by a scholar from Egypt, an inheritance, where because there's this, and I'm not saying the questioner is asking this, there's a fallacy of that men always inherit double the amount. That's actually not true. Women, there's actually 37 or 47 instances where women actually inherit more than men. And a small example would that be a daughter will inherit if somebody passes away and the man left behind a wife and 2 kids, a son and a daughter, and that same person who passed away has brothers and sisters, his brothers are not going to inherit at all, right? So something as simple as that to more in depth. But so it's not always the case. It's not always that men will inherit, women will inherit less. And there's some situations where even though there is a male there, but the women will inherit more. And that's not to be apologetic in any way. That's just to clarify certain things that people put out there to cause doubts. But anyway, if a man taking double the inheritance, as he's a qawm, as he's a male, but what about if the wife works and spends on her house, divorced or widowed at the time of inheritance? If the person is listening, I'm going to ask them if they can also, in an anonymous way, elaborate a little more, because that can mean a few things. But if you mean to say that the ex-husband passes away and the children, or if a father passes away and there's a daughter and she's divorced maybe, and in her inheritance, the reason I'm asking is the question may be mixing two things. Because if the person's divorced, yeah, Allahu Alam, they're not going to be inheriting, but they are going to be having safekeeping for after marriage. But if the person that's listening can actually, because this can go in a few different ways, inshallah. So just be more specific if you can, meaning that this person passes away and he has divorced his wife, for instance, and if you're going in that route, it's that if it's a daughter, because the double inheritance is only for son and daughter, that's why it's kind of throwing me off. So inshallah, that can be that. So please, if you're listening, add on to that, and inshallah, if I don't get any more on this, then inshallah next week I'll just focus on all the different scenarios that are related to this, which are about 4 scenarios. Inshallah. And other, yes?
Okay. So this one, I did my, I read like the Sahih Muslim hadith about the meaning of a slave will give birth to her master. Of course, I wanted to read it about this because it's like the signs of the last day, and of course, I want to see many different perspectives of different people that are students of knowledge, which is super good to get many perspectives, so I don't have to just stick to one. The meaning of the slave will give a slave will give birth to her master.
Very good. In Hadith Jibreel, you're referring to the signs of the Day of Judgment.
Yes.
One of them is that you'll see the Hufat al-Urat, Ru'ah al-Ghanam, يتطاولون في البنيان, that there's Bedouins that don't have clothing, that don't have shoes, will be building tall buildings, competing in. And the second is that the slave woman will give birth to her master. There's 2 understandings of this portion of the hadith. The first one is that children will be the masters of their parents at the Day of Judgment, right? Where the child says, do this, the parents listen. Do this, they listen. Some of it's a mixture of love, it's a mixture of fear, it's a mixture of a lot of different things, right? Commanding basically the parents have to listen, right? The second is, Wallahu alam, meaning that Allah knows best, is that some of these scholars attributed this to if there was a scenario, and the scenario happened in the past, that if a leader has a slave woman and she gives birth and her child also becomes a world leader, right? Which happened with a lot of the past dynasties in the Muslim world, right? And if that's what they might be referring to, that's also a possibility. And other scholars have speculated but the general understanding, since it's referring to, this portion is referring to the Day of Judgment and purification of the soul, on a purification soul level, and the level of tazkiyah, that's what al-ihsan is what's referred to in the hadith. on a level of purification and rights of other human beings and gratitude. A lot of them were led to believe what's meant by this is that the children will become masters over their parents. You know, Wallahu alam. You're welcome, sir. And we still have approximately 40 minutes for Salah. And I have run out of questions. There's no more questions that I have. Does anybody else have any questions? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. مش مشكلة بقى عندك حنجرة مصرية بقى خلاص. You don't need a microphone. ما شاء الله. It's fine, I can re-announce it, it's fine.
Okay. So about the issue of nasiha for the person praying next to you if he is loud or something. This goes into a reminder of an important fact or an important advantage or an important objective of Salatul Jama'ah, that we get to know each other, that the ta'aruf is one of the objectives of Salatul Jama'ah, that we become more connected as a community, that we know each other, so that when I know you well, inshallah, it will be easy to tell you that, you know, you are disturbing my salah without you getting offended or something. But if it is somebody who I know for the first time, or he prays next to me, I don't know his name, I don't know, you know, anything about him, and the only thing I want to talk to him about is that, you know, he's disturbing my salah, he might get offended. So this is, you know, when we get to when we apply this in a way that, you know, apply the objective of the Salatul Jama'ah, that we understand it and we practice it in a way that it brings the community together, it brings us together, then inshallah these things will become easier, and it will not only be about this nasiha. No, if I need something, I will go to my brother because I know him well. You know, we pray next to each other for 5 years, for 10 years, that, you know, he might be able to help me in this and so on. And this is one of the objectives that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in Salatul Jama'ah, is to bring the people together. The other point that I have some comment on is the point of Sadd al-Dhara'a. The point of it has two sides. There is a balance in there. One side is that الحلال بين والحرام بين وبينهما أمور متشابهات. You know, لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات فقد استبرأ لدينه وعرضه ومن وقع في الشبهات فقد وقع في الحرام. This is one side. But there is another side to the same issue, which is ليحل لكم الطيبات ويحرم عليكم الخبائث ويضع عنكم إصركم والأغلال التي كانت عليكم. And the hadith of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم إن هذا الدين يسر ولن يشاد الدين أحد إلا غلبه فسددوا وقاربوا وأبشروا واستعينوا بالغدوة والروحة وشيء من الدلجة. And there is more than that. يريد الله أن يخفف عنكم وخلق الإنسان ضعيفا. That in general, you know, when you do not know something, you do not always assume that it is haram, or, you know, be away from it, because الأصل في الأشياء الإباحة, that you know, الأصل في الطيبات, the rule is that maybe the Imam can explain it better.
Yes. No, because there was a lot of translating there to do. So
Yeah.
if I can just recap really quick, the hadith that he's mentioning is, you know, al-halal bayyin wal-haram bayyin. The halal has been made clear, and the haram has been made clear, and everything in between it has been doubtful, and not too many people know what they are. You know, also, you mentioned another hadith of Rasulullah of this deen is very easy, or the deen is simple in some sense, and the deen, the one who holds on to it in a way that's too intense, it'll overtake the person. Illa ghalaba, right? It's going to take the person over, right? So he also mentioned the axiom. What was the al-asl fil ashya al-ibaha? You know, the axiom or the maxim that he mentioned in the Sharia is that everything by default originally in things, in general things, is allowed unless there's a specific prohibition against it, right? So I don't know, were you done or no? Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. Akramakallah. I think we know who our next interviewee is going to be, inshallah. Yes, sir. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum. I believe that the way that you said it, it's like I give you an example that say, for example, there is a chew gum that have 0.01% alcohol. So people will say it's not gonna make you drunk. There's nothing. You're gonna need to eat 3 million of them to get something. It's not haram. So I go with your opinion that I will say, you know what, not for now. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna take that chew gum. I'll look for another gum, or I'll look for another thing. So I believe that's what you meant, that
Yes.
if there is something that in your heart, as we follow our heart, as the Prophet ﷺ said. So these little things that people, like say for example in restaurants, the person are cooking pork in some place and he put the beef on, and then, oh, that doesn't mean anything. So this is little things that it's your choice right now to stay in the safe side or just go with the taysir of our religion, of course. So I know our religion is yusr, walaysa usr, that's important. But the hadith, ما شدد الدين أحدا إلا وغلبه, I think it meant for people that trying to find the flaws in the religion. It meant for people that trying to beat the logic of the religion. It's not about halal and haram. I believe it's more than people trying to find flaws in Islam. People trying to find flaws in the Quran or things like that. That's just my opinion. But for my friend here too, I agree with Brother Ihab, of course, that al-asl, al-halal, and that you consider the things that you don't know about. But Rasulullah say, ask your heart according to the knowledge that you have and see how your heart will take you. But in the meantime, I agree with Brother Ihab and I agree with our Sheikh. If you see things, little things, and you don't know about, so stop until you know. That's how I think, just put it in simple.
Yes, sir.
No, I completely agree. Like before, when I said I stopped listening to music, I didn't just stop because I know I think it's gonna be haram. I actually, of course, did my research and did my reading and done all this before actually stopping it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh yes, this is super important. So I'm okay. So of course I gain a bit of course a bit of knowledge about Islam. Of course, for the sake of for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give da'wah, right? To give da'wah, and I, alhamdulillah, converted 5 people.
MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. Takbir.
So, I converted my mom's partner and and my mom's partner's mother. And then when I was in Dominican Republic, it's a really Catholic Christian community and just a country in general. I converted 2 brothers, and alhamdulillah. And I also and another sister of my mom's partner's family side. And my mom is actually coming here, because the reason why I want to bring this up, because of course I love my mom a lot, so much, and of course a lot for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to love your parents, and in Islam you need to love your parents. Even they tell you you're a little shump, you still got yeah man, I'm a little shump, and respect her, right? Yeah, so she's here, not here, personally, but of course, I want to know if there's like a Spanish imam, so they could give, like, of course, give her a good understanding of what Islam is. Cause of course I did it I tried doing it, and of course she listened. I did persist just a tiny bit, because I love my mom. I want to save her for hellfire, of course. And that's of course my key, and of course Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Okay, don't hide the truth. If you know the truth, of course, help other people, send the message, and save other people from hellfire. Which is a huge reward from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So, like, of course, that's that dawah to give my mom. Of course, she speaks a lot of Spanish, a little bit of English, and decent understanding of English. And yeah, like, of course, try and give her a good understanding of what Islam is, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, Jazakallah khairan. No, there was actually a brother here, Wesley LeBron, who was here from, he also worked with there's a program called the 3 Puerto Rican Imams that went to Puerto Rico for da'wah. And I'll link you up with some of these brothers and sisters, inshallah. There's also in Chicago, the Ohala Foundation. I don't know if you heard of the Ohala Foundation. Is a awesome group of brothers and sisters. I know some of them personally. I've sat with them, and they start off with doing humanitarian work. They literally start off by buying peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from Aldi and just giving it to people because they themselves didn't have much, and they were just giving out to people. So they're very much involved in activism in that sense, in khidmah, in helping people. But they also have their own durus in the sense of lectures and learning and all that in Chicago. Ohala Foundation, it's in Chicago. And you also have Islam in Spanish in Texas, which I know some of the brothers pretty well also. And they have something called the Andalusian Institute there that they formed, and they have their own masjid. Obviously everybody's welcome, but it's since a majority of people there are Spanish speaking, it's the masjid and the library there, everything is based off of Spanish Andalusia and Muslims when they lived in Spain. So they have actually a very, very good community, strong community, scholars from amongst the Spanish-speaking Muslims that are helping out with convert care and all that kind of stuff. So I'll link you up with these people, inshallah. And anybody else that's listening too, they want to have resources in Spanish, Islam in Spanish in Texas, and Ohala Foundation in Chicago. And I'll link you up with those people, inshallah, before we leave today, and we'll set that up, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
And I think if we can keep it that, inshallah, brothers and sisters, we still have approximately 25 minutes till Isha. If you guys are, unless if there's something else, if you guys have anything else, inshallah, anything housekeeping, just have a lookout for, inshallah, me and Sheikh Hassan Al-Kasi within the next coming weeks. Just going to do a little planning around it, but going to ask him questions pertaining to his journey of Quran and qira'at and recitation and all that, inshallah. Yes, sir.
I was thinking about that question that you mentioned about the inheritance. So let me ask you, actually, it raises up a question. So if the father dies and he has a son and a daughter, now the daughter is working and supporting herself. She said the asker said widow, divorced, or something like that. So so I believe the person that asked is connecting the inheritance. The للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين, for the male is double the female, because the male is always the one. When both they get married, the male get qawama, like he spend all the money on the family, but the woman doesn't. So what if the woman does spend her money on the family, or she's the one that support the family? Is that a case? Could maybe she take inheritance like the man?
No, that's a great question.
I think that's a scenario just came up to me.
In that scenario, by default, she wouldn't be. But it's very simple. Like, there's people, Islamically, you can hand your portion off to somebody else after you've received it, or before receiving it, before the qabd, right? even before the qabd, if somebody decides, like for instance, just to summarize, when somebody passes away, the first thing we do is we pay off their debts with the money that they have, if they have anything, if they do have something. The first thing that's done with their wealth is the debts that they may owe people, which is why it's good to write down debts. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه. Right? O you who believe, if you ever take a debt upon somebody, or someone's taken a debt upon you, write it down. Right? And this is one of the benefits. Because when somebody passes away, this is one of the benefits, is somebody passes away, we always see in a janazah, does, this person who passed away, my relative, my father, whatever, did they ever owe you any money? If you did, come forward, please. Right? Well, it's good to have solid evidence of signatures and all that, notarization or whatever you want to call it, right? In a simple sense or an intricate sense. So one is paying off the debts. The next is burial costs. Whatever the burial costs may occur comes actually from the wealth of the person, by default, Islamically. And the next is that in their wasiyah, in their will, if they wrote that this person, I wanted to give to this organization, I wanted to give to this organization, as long as it doesn't surpass more than a third of their wealth, right? It can't be more than a thuluth, right? And it can't be somebody who's actually inheriting. The Rasul said, "La wasiyata lil warith." There's no wasiyah, there's no wills for somebody who's actually inheriting money from you, meaning your heirlooms, right? Your heirs, anyone who's going to be inheriting from you. So in that sense, after all three of those are taken care of, the debts, the burial cost, the will, then the wealth from that, of what remains, is going to be distributed amongst your heirs, right? And in that sense, if there's only, if there's a wife, right, she'll get her portion of the sixth then, and then after that remaining, that's the only person left, then what's divided is the 2/3, what's left is for the son, and 1/3 for the daughter. In that situation, the son is allowed to say, you know what, this person has been supporting us the whole time, I consent to handing off, I accept to hand off my portion to this person. I'll put it in writing too, so we don't have any problems later, right? That's allowed. But because the illah, the underlying legal reasoning for inheritance, is not what somebody accumulates, it's what Allah has put in the fara'id. And I'll give you a small example, right? Whether the person is rich or isn't rich, the pragmatism is not involved in this type of verse. The pragmatism of, because the person's earning, they deserve, no, that's from us. That's pragmatism. That's not amr ta'abbudi. In the matters, the reason why Allah gives specific fractions in the Quran is because it's to be taken literally. Just some verses in the Quran that aren't to be taken literally, right? That you're allowed to have interpretation. There sometimes what we refer to as the lafz al-mushtarak, a word that has multiple meanings. It has a shared meaning, which is why there can be a difference of opinion, right? But when Allah is very, very specific about numerical things, especially numerical things that are in fractions, those are to be taken literally, right? And when something is taken literally, that's to be dispersed or distributed accordingly, but someone could say, you know what, I give my portion to this person. And it's obviously very much preferable that they put that in writing. Because shaitan comes into waswas in matters of money very much, and it's an easy way for him to break people apart, Wallahu a'lam. ماشي حضراتكم استأذنكم إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خيرا أكرمكم الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا